Hi friends, welcome to Adventures Found. Today I'm headed over to visit a good friend of mine who is a mushroom guru. So we're going to hang out with him today and see how he goes about growing shiitake mushrooms from a log. So come on along, check it out. The shiitake mushroom has been utilized by the Asians for centuries. The tasty little mushroom continues to grow in popularity in America for culinary reasons and health benefits as well.
I've actually had mushrooms grow on logs that look like that.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
But it's usually like 2 or 3. So it's like,
Gotcha.
what are you keeping around?
A variety of tree species are acceptable for growing shiitake mushrooms, but Paul prefers oak.
This is inoculating logs to grow shiitake mushrooms. These are oak logs. We can use some other types of logs, ironwood, sweet gum, but oak has been very successful for me. These happen to be a variety of red oak. We're going to do some white oak next. What we have to do is introduce living mycelium of shiitake mushrooms into holes into the log. There are other ways to do this, but this is the way that I've done and have a lot of success with. Drill them about 8 inches apart. I think right now we're using a 3/8 inch bit to drill into these. We have ordered wooden dowels. We take the wooden dowel, which has been introduced to some mycelium of shiitake and a little bit of grain put in a bag to give it nutrients to take off and grow. Then in the right conditions with some oxygen in the bag. You don't open the bag, but it can go through a gauze membrane. They begin to grow in there if the temperatures are right. We take and put those in here after we've drilled the log, and then we put wax over it to seal it. We're trying to seal out weed fungus from getting into these wounds, if you will. We more or less wounded the tree to introduce this fungus, mycelium, the growing threads of mushroom into this. These holes, we've put them about 8 inches apart. It's not crucial that they be 8 inches, so anywhere from 6 to 9 inches I put them in here. Then we'll rotate the log 2 to 3 inches over and then stagger the row, and between these two, this mass of mycelium will grow out in this log. This mass will grow out here, and where they meet in between, that is where we're likely to have a mushroom form. That's where the fruiting body grows out of it. These logs will produce shiitakes if they're kept moist enough in a humid area and not right in the sun. You may occasionally have to give them some water if you live somewhere where it's dry. It's been a long dry spell. They'll produce mushrooms for the next 5 to 7 years. So it seems like a lot of work to go out and cut logs. These are trees that probably won't be used for anything else. Someone's already timbered out their property. These are tree tops that are left behind. They're currently cutting some pieces to use for firewood. These are ones they probably wouldn't use because they want something in a splitter, less bark, less dirt carrying in and out of the house. So these are what's left over. They would just lay in the woods, maybe provide some cover for wildlife, but for us it's going to produce some food. So we're really using this natural resource in a way that doesn't get used much by people. Shiitakes have been grown for centuries in Asian countries. It's really been prized as a medicine by Asian cultures as well. And I don't, it's research is research. And a lot of it's based on cellular growth in a petri dish or testing it on, a mouse that's been given cancer or something like that. So that's how we do a lot of research. But it's just, I find it difficult to go out and say, this is a mushroom that will prevent cancer, or that this is a mushroom that helps to prevent or helps someone from becoming obese or sugar diabetes. But those are 3 different disease areas that they've been given credit for helping to resolve some of those issues for folks. But they're delicious.
Yeah. How do America, you talk about the Asians, they look at it as a medicinal tool,
yes,
if you will. So how do we Americans look at it? We look at it as a snack. Am I right there?
A snack or possibly a food that is difficult to get your hands on. It's unique, almost a chef chosen variety of fungus.
Okay. So it's pretty chilly today. It's like the highs in the 20s. Is there a time of year that you should do this process for another season?
That's a great question. Logs have to be live. You can't go out and cut a tree down that's dead. That won't work. The tree is already possibly has weed fungus in it. It's dead. The nutrient value is not there for the fungus to grow on. At least this particular kind of fungus. So we tend to do this whenever trees are becoming dormant. So anywhere from as leaves fall. So in the fall till the sprouts break open on the tree in the spring. So from spring through summer, you're not going to be doing this successfully. The tree will be producing chemicals that help it to resist the growth of fungus in it. Yeah.
Is there one species of wood that's more productive than another?
I'm not sure why oak has been chosen often. Sweet gum, I started experimenting with that. It does really well. My worry is that the sweet gum will rot before the oak. So you put this much time into it, invest your time into it, then I want them to produce mushrooms for the next 5 to 7 years versus 3 or 4. Okay. I have heard some horror stories too of someone taking beech and doing a lot of beech logs and then getting no mushrooms. So you want them,
a lot of effort for nothing.
Yeah, a lot of effort for nothing.
For a hobbyist to get started in this, and I'm going to call them a hobbyist.
Yes, absolutely. I consider myself a hobbyist.
Okay, what type of cost is involved to get started in producing your own shiitake mushrooms?
Well, I have a drill. I have drill bits, so that's something that a person will need to drill these holes. Today, we sort of discovered again, I was reacquainted with the idea these dowels are 3/8 inch hole needs to be made for them to go into the log. The 2 bags I bought today are going to do 40 logs. It cost me, with shipping and everything, $96 to do 40 logs this way. Then, of course, I've got $5 in the wax, and I think we paid $2 for the at a Goodwill store for the electric frying pan to melt the wax in.
Gotcha. This will grow mushrooms one time, right? This process will grow mushrooms one time, or will they reproduce a second time?
These logs that we've done today, we can expect mushrooms in about 9 months. Okay. So we should have mushrooms next fall in these logs. There are different varieties of shiitake spawn. I ordered this from a place called Field and Forest in Wisconsin. Different varieties of spawn, some that are more cold weather, some that are what we call wide range, and a lot of people want wide range because they'll dunk the logs. I actually have a tank out back that I'll dunk 4 to 6 of these logs, set a concrete block on top of them so they're submerged for 24 to 48 hours, get them out, and within another 48 hours, you should start seeing the mushrooms popping up through the sides of it. And that will happen if you dunk them in those wide range. They need, after they produce mushrooms, you need to wait 8 to 10 weeks, and then you can try and force them again.
Okay.
And depending on the water, the abundance of water and the temperature, they may make again in those 10 weeks.
Okay. So the first introduction is just to get the stuff started in the log.
Yes.
And some of that will remain even after its first production of a mushroom.
When it produces the mushroom, it's just trying to reproduce and make spores, so that those spores can be go out and reintroduce.
Dispersed.
Yes, disperse them in the woods, which, because this is an Asian mushroom, that's something that doesn't happen very well here. I don't know why exactly, but no one's really seemed to be worrying about this as an invasive species, although it's crossed my mind, but I've only been able to get this to grow on another log putting log on top of log. But I understand in Japan that's how it was first started, was to take a log that was producing mushrooms, set it on top of a pile of logs, or at least a couple big logs, and let the spores fall on it, and it would start growing mushrooms years later.
Right.
We sometimes stack them on a fence up against a tree. It needs to stay shaded, which is really hard to do this time of year when all the leaves are off. So I have a fence out back. In the corner of that fence is where I have some logs resting. I have a structure back there that my canoe sits on, goes on the back of my truck. There's boards and ladders on top of that, so it provides some shade. There's some under there. But the fact that they're close to the ground, that humidity seems to help the log. And we often have a lot of mushrooms growing at the bottom and fewer at the top. If that happens to me, I often turn the log over after a while.
I see.
I set them on gravel, stone, brick, pottery. I have some old field tile that I've got stacked, and I have logs against it. The other thing we do is we sometimes crib them. Okay. So we'll have 4, and we'll have stacked. So maybe 5 to 6 logs high at the most. Okay. And you can reach down inside of that and pull mushrooms off.
Yeah. Can you move the logs after they, or let's say 4 or 5 months in, you decide, let's move this somewhere else? Is it okay to move the logs?
Yes, I move them a lot. They get moved often. Okay. But these will produce 5 to 7 years, a couple times a year at least. And because I've gotten different varieties, I usually have mushrooms off of these 10 months of the year.
I see. Neat. Cool.
Didn't used to, but because of the different varieties,
yeah. So the soaking in the tank deal, that happens just before, like close to the end of the 9th month rotation.
If I wanted to have them, let's say 9 months from now, then yes, I would do that. I'm not going to soak them earlier unless we have an unusually dry month this summer, and then I might spray them or soak them. I've got quite a few logs, so soaking them all is not something I can do very well. It's a lot of work.
What about the mushroom itself? How to use the mushroom? Your favorite way, your preferred way to use the mushroom?
This mushroom, the stem is rather tough, so we cut the stem off, slice it into thin pieces, put it into a pan with a little bit of olive oil. We will season it, cumin, salt and pepper, or whatever you'd like to use, and usually eat them as a separate dish of food. Sometimes they go on hamburgers. I have tried to fill them and put them on a grill like a portobello. Yep. They seem to have more moisture, which is a remarkable thing, because you'll look at these and you're thinking, it doesn't look like water in that to me, but they actually retain and hold an awful lot of water. And so when you cook them in the pan, that's the first thing you'll notice, is like these mushrooms look kind of slimy and loose, which some mushrooms you think of that way anyhow. But if you heat them up and have them long enough, they'll get crispy. Some people like them crispy. I've had people that would cut the stems into little strips and cook it in a pan and eat those. It's often used to be seasoned in foods. My wife makes a wonderful mushroom soup. We often use 3 different mushrooms. This is always, though, the heart of that soup. We've had cream of mushroom soup with asparagus. That's probably my favorite.
Yep. What about storing them? Can you dehydrate them and do that kind of thing, or how do you store them?
We do have some dried ones inside. A lot of times, what happens is you'll find a log or 2 that has some mushrooms that you didn't catch. So I pick those off. They're already dry. Yep. Pick them off, put them somewhere, make sure they're dry. And then put them in a Ziploc. And so we have some dried shiitakes. We've been known to cut and cook, because there's been times that we've got at least 80 logs here right now at our house, and we'll get a big flush. We'll get a really big flush. Everything's just right. We'll have 200 or 300 mushrooms. So we often slice and cook those, and put them into the freezer. They freeze really well. They keep very well. I've been known to put them in some vodka and try and store them. My least favorite way to try and store them. I try not to wound the trees because it's just an open place for weed fungus to get in. I try and choose logs that don't have a lot of forks on them. The
weed fungus is bad because
the fungus that normally grows in this area in your natural habitat is probably going to be more aggressive than this spawn that we put in.
So it will overcome or overrule what you've introduced.
Yes. Could easily happen. So we try not to wound a tree, and I'm very selective when I go in where there's been some timbering. I try not to take ones where the log's been skinned up or cracked wide open. And this wax is okay, but I like beeswax. It's more malleable, fills in these spots better. It's more expensive, but beeswax and cheese wax.
Cheese wax?
Cheese wax is cheaper, and it works really good.
Okay.
Often if you're having success with it growing but you don't know, you can see some white growing here, let's say 5 months from now, and you're wondering, did my log do well? Is that mycelium growing in there? I'm still waiting 4 months. You'll sometimes see white fungus growing in the end. I don't mean out away from the end. I just mean you'll see a whitening growing on the end, and that means that mycelium has grown to the end and really starting to grow through and take over the log.
Are there any insect issues that try to attack this stuff, or they're attracted to them?
That can be a problem. Slugs like these, and so you've got the whole business of picking slugs off. One of the better things is if you grow oysters, there's a fungus beetle that gets on them real fast. And it's problems with harvesting, foraging other wild mushrooms. I've seen those fungus beetles. Fungus beetles, for some reason, ignore these shiitakes. That's never been, it's rare to ever see even one on there. So in that respect, a few squirrel or chipmunk bites and a slug. There's also a little gnat or it looks like a springtail out of the soil. It's very tiny. Usually when you pick one of those, you'll see a lot of those in the gills of the mushroom, because this is a gilled mushroom, not one that has a porous cap, but gilled, and those will come out. Those I set out in the sun often, upside down. Those tend to want to leave. Of course, you could always wash the mushroom, although a lot of people don't encourage you to wash mushrooms. These mushrooms take to it very well. My wife is even known to squeeze them, put them in water, soak them, squeeze them. And the first time she did it, I was like, "You got to be kidding me! What are you doing? Well, you're mistreating this amazing mushroom." And she said they're fine, and they are. They're very sturdy, tough, and they didn't hurt them at all. So by doing that, she feels comfortable about how clean they are. Putting them out in the sun for a couple hours, it is verified scientifically that boosts the vitamin D in them. And vitamin D is not an easy vitamin for us to get. That's why it's added to milk and added to some other things that you eat. You can get vitamin D just by taking the mushrooms and setting them in the sun for a couple hours.
So there you have it. That's the plan. You can grow your own shiitake mushrooms. Gather yourself a few oak logs, drill a few holes, insert the plugs with shiitake spawn, and wax them over. And then, just like Paul, you will be eagerly anticipating your harvest of shiitake mushrooms.